So let's practice building forms. Your challenge is to wire up the partially finished travel form below so that essentially it works in React. This challenge is actually one that we use at vSchool, and the URL for the original challenge is right here. You'll probably want to go there so that you can see exactly what's supposed to be done. Now in vSchool, we use this as a plain HTML forms challenge, so it doesn't really have anything to do with React, but I'm just adapting it for React for this lesson. So pause this lesson, go take a look at this website, learn some more about what you're trying to accomplish in this form, and give this a go. All right, so there's a lot of different ways that we could approach this. I think what I might do is initialize everything with state first, and then start wiring things up one at a time. Okay, so I know that my state is going to have a first name, last name. We'll also do age, which I actually have a little bit of a question myself on, but I'm just going to initialize it at 0 for now and then try something a little bit later. Let me scroll down here. I know I'm supposed to have gender, and I have a select box for location. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be destination, so I'll say destination. And then a checkbox for dietary restrictions. Now what's actually going to be there for dietary restrictions is a number of checkboxes, and because they're checkboxes, it's possible that they will check multiple boxes. And so if I'm going to have multiple dietary restrictions, what I might do is choose to save this as an array. And okay, that seems to be the last thing because here's my submit button. Now that I have my state initialized, I'm just going to start putting some of the things that I know will need to exist in my existing elements here. So we'll start with my inputs. I know that I'm going to need a name property for each one. I know I'm going to need a value for each one. And actually, this is going to be determined by state. So this will be this dot state dot something. And I know each one is going to want to be able to change. So I will have an onChange. We'll probably call it handle change. While I'm at it, I'm going to put everything on its own line. Okay, so the names will need to match the parts of state that they're representing. So this will be first name, last name, and age. And I'll actually have the same thing for state. So this will be first name, last name, and age. So it looks like I lost my curly braces there. Now maybe before I go creating a bunch of extra elements, I may finish this part off and make my handle change method. So right here, I will need a handle change. I'm going to take an event. And before I forget, I should probably find this. Now I know that I like to pull some of the elements from the event.target. So for this right now, I just need name and value. We'll add to this later when we get to the checkbox. And I'm going to set state, where whatever name I'm concerned with changes to the new value. Okay, so the buggy thing here is that this starts with a 0. Let's go down and see if these 3 inputs are working correctly. So with your name, I'm going to put this.state.firstname space and this.state.lastname. If I type in these boxes, let's see if it's working. Great. Do the same for age. And it already says 0, but if I change this to something different, okay, that works. And now the thing I actually wanted to test was to see if React complained when I started this as null. And it does. Okay, and it looks like it just doesn't like that the value on the input is null. So it recommends using an empty string, but short of me going out and doing a bunch of research, this will just have to do for now. Okay, so after a refresh, you can see I don't get my 0 age anymore, which is smart. We wouldn't want that showing up as a default of our form. And it looks like so far so good. Now let's go down and fill in some of these new elements here. Let's start with the radio buttons for gender. So I like to wrap my radio buttons in a label, and that's so that the person could also click on the text of male or the text of female and select the associated radio button, because the text is a parent of the radio button. And so I'll just put the label as a parent of my radio button, which is an input type radio. And I like the text to be on the right side of the radio button myself, so that the radio buttons are nice and lined up on the left side. And remember, the radio buttons were kind of a combination of checkboxes where they have a checked property, and also the text inputs where they have a value property. So I'm going to be adding a lot of stuff to this radio button. I'm going to go ahead and start putting things on their own lines already. And then we'll say, first of all, it has a name, which will be gender. Have a value. In this case, it will be male. And we're also going to have the checked property. This one is a little bit trickier because it's going to say this radio button is the selected one if this.state.gender is male. And then we'll have our onChange will be our this.handleChange. And let me go ahead and just copy this and change it to work for female as well. Another break here. Okay, let's refresh the page and see what we got. Male and female, and it looks like I can check those. Let me see down here if that's working. So under your gender, we will put this.state.gender. Okay, doesn't start as anything. I choose male, and there we go. Change it to female. Perfect. All right, we're cruising. So let's do our select box now. This is the select box for our locations or our destinations. And this is going to be a select box. And we know we're going to have some options in here. And let's put 4 options. Obviously, this is not a great airline that's flying to only 3 or 4 locations, but whatever. Now, I remember that our select and our options all take a value property. They're a little bit different from each other, but I'm going to go ahead and just add a value. Okay, the value on my options is simply what state should be if this option is the one that's chosen. So this is where I'm going to put my actual locations. So I might say something like Germany, and I'm going to keep this lowercase for the extra value just to stay consistent with how I have things elsewhere. Let's do Norway. The North Pole. And why not? We'll say the South Pole. Now, the value of the select box is not the options that we have, but rather the chosen option. So this will be determined by state as part of a controlled form. We are calling this destination. And then, just like our other ones, we need to make sure that this has a name. Say is destination. Again, it needs to match the property and state. And we'll have our same onChange, which is this handle change. It's getting long, so let's put it on its own lines. And down in the display area, we will put destination from state. Now you'll notice here that it has automatically selected the first one, but doing so has not actually updated state. So my destination is still empty. If I wanted Germany, I would actually need to switch to Norway and then back to Germany to actively choose this as my option. And so what a lot of people will do is they'll just put an option at the top that maybe we'll leave empty and put something like that. Okay, Germany gives me Germany, and I can actually actively switch to any one of these that I want. Okay, well, we've saved probably the more difficult one for last, and that's our checkbox. Now, I feel like I've had some clarity since I first started state. At the beginning of this lesson, I created an empty array for my dietary restrictions. And I'm thinking it's actually going to be easier if I save this as a sub-object where I have an option for each one of my dietary restrictions, and the value is going to be a Boolean. So instead of trying to manipulate my booleans into some kind of text value, instead I'm just going to create an object, and each one of these will represent a boolean of some kind. I will probably want each of these to be unchecked as the default, so I'll just say each one is false. Say is kosher, is lactose free, and that should be good enough. So now I'll need 3 checkboxes, each one representing one of these 3 properties. Down here in my form, again, I will wrap everything in a label. Have my input. Type of checkbox. The name be is vegan. onChange will continue to be this handle change, which, if you remember, we're going to need to update in order to correctly handle the checkbox. And then I need something to direct whether or not this is checked. And this is going to be a little extra nested level here. So it's going to be dietary restrictions dot is vegan. And as part of my label, I'll just put a label that says vegan. Okay, so I'm actually just going to create a few of these and update them. So I have is vegan, is kosher, and this one was lactose free. Okay, let's take a look and see what that looks like. Okay, awesome. Now notice that, once again, I'm not able to change any of these checkboxes. If you didn't get this far when you did this yourself before we started doing this together, take the time now to see if you can update our handle change so that it can handle the changes in a checkbox. Okay, so once again, the checkboxes don't have a value property, and currently our handle change only is able to update things with a value. But we know that we're going to have to check if the type is checkbox, so I'll need to pull the type from my element. And I'm also going to want to see if checked property is true or false, or rather just see what the checked property is. And then what I need to check is if the type is a checkbox. I'm actually going to do my set state on its own line, because it's going to get a little more complicated. Remember that in this case, I can't just say to set the state of name checked. That's because I've chosen to have a nested object here. Currently, state does not have a property called is vegan or is kosher. Instead, it has a property called dietary restrictions, which has a property called is vegan or is kosher. Now, normally React is smart enough to know that if I'm updating just one part of state, like the destination, it will combine that with the rest of state However, I'm not 100% sure offhand if I update just one part of a nested object, if it will also update the rest of state. So I'm going to be live testing this here with you. Let's give it a try. First thing is this won't work either way. So this will have to be dietary restrictions, be an object, and we will update the name. Before I can test this, I need to finish my ternary because this is broken currently. So I'll say otherwise this dot set state name value, just like we had before. I have a feeling this isn't going to work, but let's give it a shot. So no errors so far, that's good. I'm going to just put something in here. We'll see that my name is working. Now if I check vegan, yeah, it doesn't seem to like it. It thinks that I'm changing something from a controlled form to an uncontrolled form, and that has to do with the way that state is updating. Now, fortunately, I think I should be able to use the object spread notation, which means what I can do is pass in the previous state. If you remember when we talked about that state, how I can either provide a brand new version of state or I can provide a function that receives the previous state as a parameter and uses that to update state. So I'm going to change this to the second way, and I return a new object. And inside of dietary restrictions, I'm going to take all of the properties from prevstate.dietary restrictions and then update the rest. And it actually looks like maybe Scrimba does not have the ability to do the object spread notation. It really depends on what version of ECMAScript you are transpiling using Babel. In this case, it seems like the object spread notation doesn't work in Scrimba. So at this point, I think I've kind of worked myself into a corner. One workaround that I can do and probably will do for now is to just get rid of my sub object dietary restrictions and make each one of these their own property on state. They just got promoted. In which case I can probably simplify this quite a bit and go back to the way it was. So we'll get rid of dietary restrictions, we'll get rid of this, have name checked. And now that is vegan, is kosher, and is lactose free are kind of first class citizens here in state, I can simply update by its name and determine whether it's true or false. Let's try this. Okay, we're doing some live debugging here. It says that it cannot read property is vegan of undefined. And notice that I still have my checked saying this.state.dietary restrictions. So we don't need that anymore. Do our handle change and try again. Okay. So now I should be able to enter something as a first name, which shows up in my name, and then choose some of these. And oh, we haven't updated our dietary restrictions display yet. So down at the bottom, let's just see if we can get this to work. Your dietary restrictions, say vegan. Let's state that is vegan, and we'll just do the same with kosher. and lactose free. You'll notice that it looks like they're starting out empty. If I check them, it's not actually displaying any text here. The reason is React does not display booleans, true or false, as text on a screen unless you go out of your way to make it text. So one quick workaround that I could do is I could put another ternary here that says you should display yes if it's true, no if it's false. Okay, down here I actually get the no's showing up. Let me put these each in their own paragraphs so that they don't mash together this way. Okay, and you'll see vegan no, kosher no, lactose free no. When I select some of these, those have changed to yes. Or another fun practice that would just be a regular JavaScript challenge is to try to get it to display the words vegan, kosher, and lactose free as a comma separated list. I won't do that here because I've already taken up time just trying to debug this with you. If you want, you can pause the lesson and give that a shot. Might be kind of a fun challenge. Okay, and with a little bit of workaround and having to change a little bit of our state, we have been able to successfully build our form. It's obviously not very pretty, but it seems to be working. So if I fill everything out, not 9,999 as it turns out. Looks like, oh, and I have to select a destination. Let's go to Norway. It looks like everything has filled out correctly. Okay, I mentioned at the beginning of learning forms, it's a kind of complicated process, and forms in general are very important when it comes to web applications. Obviously, they're not always going to be filling out lengthier forms like this. But if you think about it, anytime you click a checkbox or anytime you have a radio button, a sign up form or a login form or anything like that, a lot of that is using forms. So really understanding this is going to help you be a better developer for web applications that users can interact with. So although I said it's not necessarily important to have each input type syntax memorized, it's still a really good idea to practice this, play with it, see if you can really understand it so that when the time comes to build a form in your React app, you can do so with relative ease. So thanks for your patience while we went through and debugged some of this stuff. Hopefully that was a good exercise in general. When you're ready, let's move on.